welcome everybody to another episode of Tangent TV. This is the second session for Action Week, and I want to welcome you guys back. For anybody watching this live, I'm happy to have you. If you want to ask questions or add in the chat, please do. For anybody who's watching this as a recording, all of the links to everything I'm going to talk about today will be in the description down below. So as always, I'm just starting out on the Tangent website. You can see now that we actually have done a brief update, so a lot of information is just here if you want to have a look at it. Some of the news and events, including Action Week, can be found there. And if you scroll all the way down, if you haven't already, you can sign up to our mailing list or join Tangent Online, the open Blackboard module with loads of resources like the ones I'm talking about today for innovators and entrepreneurs. That is open to just Trinity students, but if you're not a Trinity student and still want some information, you can keep watching these videos, but also you can sign up to our mailing list, which is another way to find out more about what's going on. So with that out of the way, this is Action Week. Everything's a bit faster paced, and the goal is for me to give you resources that you can run away with and start taking action. So we're diving right into it. We looked at a few of these last week, but I'm going to go into them a bit more. We're going to the IDEO design toolkit, you can see here, and the expectation of today is you've probably already gone through Action Week Phase 1, where I talked about my idea for the idea starter kit, where you have your value proposition canvas, your business model canvas, and then your elevator pitch ready to go. So that kind of frames your initial idea, and you're able to communicate it effectively and have a really core understanding of what it is that you're working on. So once you have that, this is where, and there are a lot of different things that you can do at any given time, and again, I'm just brushing over them, but this is one opportunity where you might be able to now bring in an expert in the industry that you're speaking about to try and understand a bit more. So the first tool that I'm going to look at, or the workshop that I'm going to look at in the IDEO toolkit, again, all of the links will be in the description following this video being uploaded. For those of you in the chat live here, I'm just going to put this one in. If you want to navigate beyond the initial one, please do. But as I said, everything will be up in the description. So the expert interview. Experts can get you up to speed quickly on a topic, giving you key insights into relevant history, context, and innovations. Though the crux of the inspiration phase is talking with people you're designing for, you can gain valuable perspective by talking to experts. Experts can often give you a system-level view of your project area, tell you about recent innovations, successes, and failures, and offer the perspective of organizations like banks, governments, or NGOs. You might also look to experts for specific technical advice. Now, the reason I have this at this stage in the action development phase is just because once you're able to effectively communicate your idea in a concise way, that it's a good opportunity to then begin speaking to experts in the field, just because they'll have immediate context for what it is you're working on, and as suggested there, may be able to give you some feedback on how your ideas fall within the current landscape of ideas that are out there or innovations that have already happened. So with most of the IDEO frameworks, if you've been on one of these before, you've seen IDEO in their frameworks. They have on the left-hand side the suggested amount of time that this activity would take, the level of difficulty, which is interesting to me because some of them are harder, easier for others. Materials needed for this one: pen, camera, notebook, participants, interviewer, and the expert, just yourself and the person who you're trying to get information out of. And this again is in the inspiration phase of development. They have 3 phases: inspiration, ideation, and implementation. In Tangent, we have imagination, collaboration, action. It's all focused on getting your ideas off the ground, but this is more of an earlier stage action that you'd be able to take once you have the core idea that you're working on. The steps: number 1, you determine what kind of expert you need. If you're working in agriculture, perhaps an agronomist. In reproductive health, a doctor or policymaker may be a good bet. So the first step is just deciding who it is that you'd like to talk to. Number 2, when recruiting your experts, give them a preview of the kinds of questions you'll be asking and let them know how much of their time you'll need. So setting expectations for what it is that you're going to be talking about can allow them to maybe bring some context and knowledge to the conversation, and also making sure that you respect the time of the person who you're going to be speaking with. Choose experts with varying points of view. You don't want to have the same opinions over and over. Exactly. If you want to have kind of 2 sides of an issue or 2 different ends of the spectrum in a given area, it can build context into how your idea falls within the 2. Number 4, ask smart, researched questions. Though you should come prepared with an idea of what you'd like to learn, make sure your game plan is flexible enough to allow you to pursue unexpected lines of inquiry. When you speak to an expert, they may have an interest in a particular area of what you're talking about. This is why I suggest that this is something you start to do once you're at the phase of, I understand what I think my idea is going to be, or what my startup is going to be. Then you can bring it to the experts and look at, okay, how do they see what I think I'm working on in that context? And if you come prepared, they're potentially going to be able to help you more, which is obviously the goal. And then number 5, record your interview with whatever tools you have. A pen and paper works fine. In one of the collaboration weeks workshops, we looked through some of the tools that you might use that actually can do speech to text. If you want to have a look at those, they are really good for any interview that you're going to be running. I see Colin in the chat, how have I lived his life in rural Ireland and never heard of an agronomist? Well, now you have. That's why you tune into Tangent TV. So that's just the first one. As I said, I'm not going to dive too deep into any of these. The goal is for you guys to take these on and run with them. So if that's what you're looking to do, go right ahead, try out your expert interviews. The second one that I am going to look at today as an action that you might take is creating a journey map. A journey map allows you to identify and strategize for key moments in the product experience or service you're designing. This simple framework can help you think through key moments for your customer as they experience your solution. Consider how your customer first becomes aware of your solution, how they make a decision to try it, what their first interaction and engagement is like, how they might become a repeat user, how the solution might ultimately impact their life. As a customer begins to benefit from your idea, how can they tell other people about it? A journey map should help you to visualize a customer's experience from beginning to end. So again, once you have that early idea developed and you know what it is you're trying to do, you've looked at the value proposition canvas and the gains or pains, the pains you're trying to relieve and the gains you're trying to create, you can look more broadly at what is the journey that a customer is going to go on from even before they start all the way down to the end where they may purchase and then be an advocate for you for future people who would come and purchase whatever your product or service is. The quick steps, again, the details are on the left-hand side, but the quick steps start with the seed of an idea, a seed idea of which your solution could be, maybe one you sketched on a Post-its during a brainstorm. We went over brainstorming before. If you look at some of the ideas you've come up with in your brainstorm, you've brought them together and created your initial idea, your initial elevator pitch. This is where you can take that from a rough prototype. Or idea emerged from early. Rough prototype, you're looking to explore further. If you're looking to explore a prototype that you've already made, this can be good at that stage. Again, these are things you can do over and over again. Number 2, start by writing a simple 1 to 2 word headline of the most core moments of engagement for your user on a Post-it. This doesn't need to be a detailed representation, the way you might build a storyboard, but rather a snapshot. An example might be first exposure to the product. So that could be one part in the customer journey, the first time they see the product. It could be on an advertisement, but then there's going to be a series of steps after that, all the way up to the customer purchasing the product, and then you can go even further. You can also take steps before that, before the customer even hears about the product, to look into what type of customer might be interested in this and where would they be before they found this product. That can help inform some of your advertising efforts. So I'm just reading, Geraldine, you said, do we write the personas before the CJM? The CJM being the customer journey map. I'm going to take a guess that that's what that means. Do you write the personas before the customer journey map? I think that in this exercise specifically, you can look at just creating the customer journey map. You start from what you know. That's the goal. So start from what you know. You know that when somebody is buying your product, here's what it's going to look like. That's usually what you have an idea of. And then you just try and work your way out from that. And in this way, you can create a persona. That is one thing you can do. But you can also work your way back to the persona by going, what are the steps? Okay, somebody is going to buy the product here. Before that, they have to go to the website. Before they go to the website, they probably heard about it here. on a Facebook page, say, or in an advertisement, where is that advertisement and where are you able to get those advertisements, and work your way back to who it is that is going to see that. And it may inform your persona in that way. All of these things are going to be interconnected, and if you do have a specific persona that you would like to create a journey map from, you can also start from here is that person, and I know these things about them, and then work through the flow of the model. So in theory, it should work back to front, and the goal of using the post-its to kind of place things allows you to map out how somebody would move through your journey. So I hope that answers your question. If it didn't, clarify in the text, and I'll answer for you there. So number 3, you want to write down the name of any other key moments on separate post-its. The number of key touch points you identify may vary from concept to concept, but try to focus on no more than 3 to 5. Consider what might be most critical to the person you're designing for. Then number 4, place the post-its in an order you think your user would likely experience them, and evolve your original journey map as helpful by adding, removing, recording, and revising the key moments. So this is where you create the journey, and then you can assess the journey. So not only do you build it out, I'm glad that was helpful, Geraldine. Glad I could help there. So if you create the journey map, you're now looking at it and trying to assess it. So it may be a case of creating your journey map and then coming back to it another day. So obviously this is meant to be one exercise, but I always find that when I step away from something and then come back to it another day, I see it in a bit different way. And it's like, oh, that doesn't actually make sense in the story, and you can adapt your journey as you go. Obviously, if you're developing a new idea or launching a startup, you have a number of days to work on this, so you may be coming back to it constantly. And then, number 5, you can use this journey map as a starting point to inform a more detailed storyboard or to help focus the rapid prototypes you start to build out and role play. Now, this is the key, is that this is just a journey. So it's just the idea of like the key points, the high level points. You're not necessarily going as detailed into the specific story, which is something that you can build out a bit deeper later. And there is a workshop on storyboarding. If you guys go to IDEO, you can look through that specifically. I'm not going to go that detailed today because this is just trying to get you to start taking action. And I think this is a really good exercise to start with that. So I'm not going to spend too much more time on that. I'm going to go on to exercise number 3 for those who are interested and at the phase of looking to develop a prototype. Here is an exercise on how to determine what it is to prototype. Because often when you're thinking about developing your ideas, you don't know exactly what the first thing you should build is, but this can kind of help you to narrow that down. So, determine what to prototype. There are so many ways to prototype an idea. Here's how to isolate what to test. Your idea will have lots of testable components, so be clear about what you need to learn and which components will give you the necessary answers. Prototyping isn't about being precious. Make simple, scrappy prototypes to not only save time, but focus on testing on just the critical elements. You might be trying to learn something like how big should this be, or what should the uniforms of the social enterprise look like? At this stage, you should have a lot of questions about how your idea should work. This is a great way to begin answering them. So it's a way of starting to answer your questions by starting to create something. With your team, so these are the steps. It's just a 30-minute exercise, so it's on the shorter side of the exercises they have here. Now, obviously, some things are going to take longer for certain groups of people than others, but this is just a gauge of how long it might take you. So with your team, write down the key elements of your idea, think practically about what needs to be tested, and write down your primary questions for each component. Then number 2, now pick a few questions to answer. If you want to prototype an interaction, consider putting a skit together with your team. That's one way of role-playing and acting it out. If you are testing a logo, print it out and stick it on a t-shirt to solicit feedback. You can walk around with a piece of paper that you taped to your shirt to see what people think of the logo, or wherever it might be. You don't necessarily need to go down the whole road of creating a logo, getting it fully printed on a shirt and all of that. There are easier ways to prototype quicker and get feedback so that by the time you do make the investment, you're ready and know you're doing the right thing. Number 3, think through what kind of prototype makes the most sense to answer these questions. You might consider holding a brainstorm now. As we looked at in Collaboration Week, brainstorming is a thing that you're going to continuously do to try and come up with new ideas. If you have a specific question around one of the things that you would like to test, you can have the statement be, how might we best test this element of the prototype? If it's, how will users use this page of our application? You might come up with 5 different ways of testing that and be able to try 2 of them because you're working so quickly versus trying to develop the perfect thing that works end to end and then test it. Testing smaller segments can often be really useful, and that's reflected in point number 4. This process is about learning, not getting it right the first time. Better to test a miserable failure and learn from it rather than take ages making a beautiful, highly refined prototype. Ultimately, that prototype might not be what the users are looking for. And the key here is just getting that user feedback and figuring out what it is that you need to test right now and how you might test it right now in order to take the next step to answer the next question. This is how you start to take actions that are going to start to stack up and end up in you launching a product that you already have validated with customers without having the final product. That's the goal of this, and that's why I think it's so important at this stage. Now, the last thing I'm going to go through in the area of idea development is the idea of rapid prototyping. So this is figuring out what to prototype. Once you know what to prototype, in terms of building a prototype, build your prototypes quickly, share them immediately, and keep learning. So for human-centered designers, rapid prototyping is an incredibly effective way to make ideas tangible, to learn through making, and quickly get feedback from the people you're designing for, because prototypes are meant only to convey an idea, not to be perfect. You can quickly move through a variety of iterations, building on what you've learned from the people you're designing for. Rapid prototyping makes sure that you're building only enough to test your idea, and that you're right back in there making it better once you've gotten feedback that you need. So yeah, I see Colin, fail fast, fail cheap. That's dead on. That's exactly what they're talking about here. You want to fail as quickly as you can so that you can get to the next stage rather than trying to build something secretive in a garage the first time and try and hope that when you launch it to the world, it's going to get it right. There's an element of IP and protection, and I'm going to go into that next. But for now, we're just thinking about how do we build the simplest thing as quickly as possible to get it out to the world and test it. So once you've determined what to prototype, which is the one just before, that's why I have these connected, the time has come to build it. You can make any number of prototypes, storyboards, role plays, models, mock-ups. The goal here is to make something tangible that conveys the idea you want to test. No need to make it perfect, just make it good enough to get the idea across. And then number 3, take your prototype out and test it with people you're designing it for. Put it in their hands and ask them what they make of it. Make sure to get feedback. Now this is an important thing because they're talking about different ways that you may prototype. When you're prototyping, oftentimes you come up with a pitch deck that you may end up pitching to potential investors or in some sort of competition. In the early stage startup world, especially with student entrepreneurs, there are a lot of competitions that you may be presenting for. However, the judges are rarely, if ever, your target market. And that presentation may get you feedback on the business, but it's not necessarily getting you the feedback that you need on your prototype, on what it is that you're designing. And one of the most powerful things that you can bring into a presentation is validated feedback from the customers you're creating a solution for. So this is a really powerful way to do so. You create something very simple that you can just convey the idea to the customers you're going to be talking to, and then bring it to them and see what they say. So number 4, here is where you can now integrate feedback and iterate. Once you've quickly built another prototype, you'll do it all over again, and it's just right. That's the goal, is you're going to end up with something that's just right because you got the feedback from people, and then you created something that worked better. When you can tell a story of we didn't get it right the first time, but we know we have it right now because we got it wrong before, that's really powerful because it shows that you've grown into what it is that you're creating. And in fact, most startups don't start the way that they're going to end up. A lot of ideas started one place, pivoted, and ended up someplace else because they followed what consumers needed. And this rapid prototyping method is a really good way to make sure that you end up with something that customers really want. So that is the first part of this. I'm going to go into a few other things, but this kind of concludes the idea development. Now I'm going to look at business development because it's Action Week. I'm focusing on a lot of things at once, but I wanted to kind of bracket it into 2 segments. So in terms of business development, right, a question that I get often, right, is when I'm developing a startup, at what point do I have to form a company? At what point do I have to have a co-founder's agreement? At what point do I have to protect my IP? So what I've done, I have this in the text, in the Blackboard module. So in Tangent Online, in the open Blackboard module for students, you can go in and you can find these resources, but I wanted to make sure that these were in one place that everybody can access. I don't want to be exclusive in that way. So I'm going to go through some of the key ones that I have here, and obviously they are all links out to things that are already freely out there in the world. I just want to put them forward for you guys. And again, none of these are sponsored or paid for. They're literally just really good resources that are out there for free. So number one that I want to go to is Frontline Ventures has a website on putting, well, it has a number of things, but one of the topics that I think is very useful is putting together the founding team. And for anybody who's in here live, I'm going to put it into the chat right now just because this is kind of a whole nother place that we're in right now. This is Frontline Ventures. You can click through their table of contents and they have a number of other things to go through. And in other sessions at the end of the week, we might go through more of these. But for today, I wanted to start with putting together the founding team and just give you a glance at it so you know what you're going into. Founders should have a history before they start a company. Otherwise, they are just rolling the dice. That's Peter Thiel. Choosing a founder is like choosing a marriage partner. Yes, it's that important. When you're choosing somebody who you're going to work with on a business, it's massively important because that's somebody who you're going to spend a lot of your time working on. Now, obviously, we're at the stage now where we're thinking about this is a real thing. We're developing the idea. We might be actually founding a company very soon. So these are some things that you might want to consider or you should consider before you actually launch into things. There are some initial founder considerations. I don't think the best value I can bring you is me reading all of this for you, but do feel free to follow the link. As I said, if you're watching the recording, the link is in the description. The one thing I'm going to read here, though, is the little bomb here. They have kind of labeled out what is the most important bit of it. So a simple example of something to be avoided would be where a founder leaves a business at a relatively early stage and holds on to all of their shares, while the remaining founders then continue the tough journey to grow the business. Most people would believe that it is unfair that the departing founder maintains their full shareholding in these circumstances, but that's exactly what will happen if there is no founder's agreement to the contrary. An even worse example would be if that former founder holds on to their shares and subsequently seeks to block a certain corporate action like an exit or an acquisition. So these are some things that could happen, that could be reasons why you want to have a founder's agreement up front, or at least some sort of agreement with the people that you're working with. Now, the challenge often is for early stage founders and students in particular that I've never created a legal document before. I don't exactly know what it is that I need to have in it. So this is why I think this Frontline Ventures workshop is really valuable, purely because you can go down, the following elements should be discussed at the outset. And it has a number of bullet points that you can go through. So number one, the roles that each founder is likely to take, and whether those positions are likely to be replaced by more experienced personnel if the company grows. If that occurs, what happens to the replaced founder? So that would just be one question that could start a topic of conversation. And you don't have to go through all of these at once. It's just things that you should talk about. So for example, what constitutes success for the business? People may have differing perspectives. So those are some initial things. And then answers to the following should be agreed in writing. So the ones above are the things to discuss. Then the things that you want to then put down in writing so that it's something to hold yourselves accountable to are those below. And these are a number of questions that you can go through. As I said, I'm not going to bring you value by going through all of these, but just here's one. How are serious disagreements between founders dealt with? If there's a serious disagreement, which in a stressful environment there very well might be, how are we going to deal with that? That's a conversation to have before the disagreement happens, because then you have some form of policy to be able to look back on and say, hey guys, this is what we decided we would do when this occurs. Here's how we follow that. And this is massively important to make sure that you and your teammates are able to continue to work effectively, even through the tough environment that is a startup. So for this, I'm going to leave it at that. If you guys want to have a look more deeply at the toolkit, there's a lot more there, but just wanted to touch on that because I think it's valuable for you today. The other one from this that I'm going to look at is the IP and confidentiality. Now, again, I'm not going to read everything, just some little blurps, but if you want to have a look more deeply, do go right ahead. IP and confidentiality may not seem to be the most exciting topics to think about when you are at such an early stage, but you should stay mindful of how they play into your company's growth. A lot of your IP and confidentiality needs will be dependent on your product, sector, and industry. So this is another area where if I'm not a lawyer, I may not know anything about co-founders agreements and what's legally binding. Again, I may not know a lot about IP and confidentiality, and that's a real challenge, but this kind of walks you through the basics of what you might need to know. By no means is it concrete legal advice, however, it gives you guidance on how to get started and even start those conversations. So again, I'm just going to read the big bomb here. Unless you are in a very IP heavy industry such as medtech, where the consideration of patentable inventions will come a lot earlier, the focus on IP at early stages will revolve mostly around copyright and trademarks. Now, if you're not familiar with copyright and trademarks, don't worry. I'm going to go into a little thing that will tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but just know that it is different from getting a patent. Make sure that the company owns everything that has been developed by your employees, contractors, and advisors. In your contracts of employment, you should also ensure that you are free to use any material developed independently by employees if that material is then included in any of your products or services. So essentially, this is the main thing, is just to ensure that whatever your team is developing, there's an agreement within your team that that IP, that intellectual property that's being developed, if you're building an app, if you're building a prototype and you're building a product, all of that is held by the company. The company owns that intellectual property. That's the most important thing here to get started and to start to think about and be sure that everybody's on board with at an early stage. But there's a lot more that you can go into. There's things about contracts and how you might bring somebody on board, ensuring that the work that they do is going to be owned by the company. But I won't go down into too much detail. Confidentiality talks a bit about elements of your business that should always be treated as confidential. So customer communications, if somebody is talking to a customer on your behalf or on the company's behalf, you don't want that to be disclosed. So these are just things to look through and make sure you know before you go into the founding process. Again, not going to go too detailed. The next thing I want to look at is from a .gov website. It is actually from the Irish Intellectual Property Office. And this is another website that I'm just going to share the link to here. Again, if anybody is watching this on record, the link is in the description. But this is just turning ideas into assets. It has some of the key values around or basic explanations around the four kind of core areas of IP: patents, trademarks, designs, and copyrights. So you can go into any one of these, say you were going into copyright, and then it even breaks it down even more. Copyright licensing bodies, understanding copyrights. If I need to understand them, there's a bit more information on what they are. So this is just a really good resource to dig into. I don't think that in this format I can bring the most value to the most people, but I just want to give you guys that link so that you have a space to go and look into what it is that you might want to protect within your business, be it creating a patent, be it creating a trademark, having a design that you want to protect, or having some form of copyright, and if so, which type. So with that, the second to last thing I'm going to show you guys today is from the companyformations.ie. Again, it's just one of many websites that help people create companies, but this website will allow you to look up the name of your company. So if you are looking to create a new company for free, you can look up if that name is available. So the first thing you want to know is if I'm going to name my company something, which again at the early stages is not the most important thing by any means whatsoever. What you're going to call your company is probably an afterthought, but it's something that I get asked often, so I wanted to share this here. Here is a place where you're able to just put in what the name is, or the second name that you would like to have your company, and they will look up for you whether or not that is available. So again, the link to this will be in the description. I'm also, for the sake of those who have gone to take the time of being here live today, thank you for being with us. The link is now in the chat there, so you can have a look if you'd like. Now, the last thing, which is also along the lines of creating names, again, afterthought, not the most important thing, but something that people like to look at, especially if you're launching social media accounts like the ones that we have just there, at TCD Tangent on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, as well as LinkedIn, so do check us out. Shameless plugging does happen on occasion, but this is the last website I want to show you guys. It's namecheck.com. And what it does is it will look up all of the social media sites that you may be interested in having a domain on. So if you want to have an Instagram page, a Twitter page, and a Facebook page like we do, that all have at TCD Tangent, what you can do is type in that website just here. You type that in, say Tangent. Now, Tangent, I don't believe we're going to have, but just you look up Tangent and it will show you the website, it'll show you .com.uk domain names, but it will also show you social names. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, obviously they're all going to be taken because we are lucky enough to have them. However, whatever the name is that you would like to look up, it's an easy way to find out what social media handles are available on all channels at once, rather than looking up one at a time, which can be a bit tedious. So guys, this is the last little resource I have for you today. It is Action Week. So with Action Week, I hope that you guys get out there and start taking action. You've developed your ideas. You may have brought together a bit of a team to get yourself started. Now's the time to start taking the action and making it all happen. What I will say, the plug for tomorrow we are going to have David Gluckman, the creator of Bailey's and a lot of other famous drinks brands. He's going to be talking about how those stories were told, or how those stories of development came to be, and that will round out our storytelling series. So do check that out tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Be sure to set your reminder, and also set your reminder for Friday, which will be in just 2 days, that will have the final episode of Action Week and round out our 3-part series, Imagination, Collaboration, and Action Week. I hope to see you all there, and thank you for everyone who tuned in live. I'll see you tomorrow.